Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for our first in a series of webinars on leadership. Today we're going to be talking about leadership and the management of people. My name is Michelle Burton, and I am the principal owner of CoreTech Revolution. I have over 20 years of experience in healthcare, technology, and management. CoreTech's been in business for about 15 years. And we work heavily with healthcare and technology companies of all sizes to help them grow in a variety of different ways. And we're very excited to have you here today so that we can share some of our experiences with you. I would like to introduce you to Jane Niederberger. She is also an experienced healthcare technology executive. She has over 30 years of experience in the industry. And she has been working with the CoreTech team for several years as their partner, specifically in strategy and how to bring healthcare organizations to the next level. Today, Jane is going to be kicking off again the first in a series of webinars on leadership and the management of people. We'll start today with a series of basic leadership concepts, and as the series goes on over the next several weeks, we'll dig a little deeper into those concepts and some of the techniques you can use to improve. If you have any questions along the way throughout the webinar, please feel free to add them to the chat window, and we will get those addressed at the end of our webinar as time permits. So with that, I would like to introduce you to Jane. Jane, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the four-part webinar series. As Michelle mentioned, each segment builds upon the previous. So hopefully any questions that we're not able to answer or we don't answer will be covered in future ones, but keep asking in the chat area. Everything does tie together. Secondly, I want to apologize. I've got a little bit of a scratchy throat and a cough, and I will try to mute myself so I'm not coughing in your ear. So bear with me a little bit, please. It's that time of year. As we look at leadership and management, there are many different definitions of both of them, some that make them very similar and some that make them look very different. Leadership is not necessarily a position, though. It's really the ability to influence others. And sometimes you're able to influence others without having a position of authority. So you're not in a management position necessarily. So leadership is really about the action of leading a group of people, providing direction, providing guidance, whereas management is more of a process. You're dealing with things, with people, you've got controls in place. It's think more administration or running things. Assigned leadership is based on a titled role and authority. And it oftentimes can be a management role. So think of a director or an executive director. By their title and position, they are expected to lead people and to lead a department towards achieving goals and a vision that brings the company forward. They're also tasked with running that department, looking at the metrics, doing the very tactical work. So sometimes you will see that people can have an assigned leadership role and be a phenomenal leader and manager. And sometimes their strength is in one area or the other. They're a great leader, not so good manager, or not so good leader and a very good manager. So let's dissect that a little bit further as we go along. There's three major differences in leaders versus managers. At a high level, leaders have people follow them, and managers have people who work for them. That's a generalization, but a kind of a nice summary or a picture to have in your mind. When you look at creating value, oftentimes in a leader, you'll see them generate value above and beyond what the team does. They are always looking at the bigger picture, the bigger future, and kind of that giant world out there. Whereas a manager tends to be more focused on Are we getting things done and ticking and tying things over time? I once had the privilege of working for a CIO who had a daunting task of building an entire new infrastructure in an organization. And while she was a taskmaster, it getting things done and hitting the deliverables, so she was managing very well. She also was very focused on building all of our skill sets and our leadership skills as we were doing this. When you asked her what her job was, she would tell you, in addition to getting the work done, I am building future CIOs. That is my job. So that is how I would define the leader. If you look at circles of influence, leaders do good for all. They see the big picture and how everybody fits into it, and they're always scanning the horizon. Managers tend to look for assignments and how to progress forward almost in a smaller world, if you will. They don't necessarily see the bigger picture. And in terms of leading people, leaders have the ability to influence, inspire, and enable others. Whereas managers oftentimes just are able to outline daily tasks for people to accomplish, but don't inspire them to a greater good or to something bigger than that. And if you think about it, has there ever been a leader, a person in your work history or in your life, it doesn't even have to be work, who had such an impact on you that you wanted to follow them to where they went? You wanted to work with them again, be on their team again, just be near them because of the things they did. When I used to hire VPs at Anthem, that was one of my first hiring questions. Do people follow you? And give me examples. Because I had already screened them for their technical skills. But if I knew that people were willing to pack up their families, switch jobs, kind of do some of these tumultuous events to follow these leaders to new places, that they had something very special that I couldn't necessarily teach them, and that they would be contagious to the rest of the organization in a very, very positive way. And it brings everybody to a new and better level. So think about that when we're going through here and we're talking about leaders. Is there somebody in your history, in your career, that you would follow? In just about any industry, time, space, money, and people are among the resources to be managed. And we all know you kind of juggle them and do what you need to do on any given point. One could argue, though, that people are the greatest resource. You can get the most from them, but it's also the most challenging part of your job. How many times have you said this job would be easy if it weren't for the people? I think we have all been there before. And so people are your greatest resource, and they need to be led, and they need to be managed. And we need to serve them well. We need to see what they need. Do they need a bigger vision? Do they need coaching in one area or another? But how do we help them be the best version of themselves when they're working as part of our team? So not all managers are leaders. Leaders are usually managers, not always, but usually managers. Whereas the manager exists to plan, organize, and coordinate, the leader really serves to inspire and motivate. And so when you look at both formal and informal leaders, as we talked earlier, leaders can be in a position, a director, a VP, what have you. They can have the title, and that's assigned leadership. So they have the authority to do what they need to do. Informal leaders have the ability to influence without authority. So think in your organization, the easiest example that always comes to me is if there's a tech leader. they're not necessarily a manager, because usually really good tech people realize that they're really not good people managers, but they're really good at technology. And so when something's about to be changed or to be done or to be rolled out, we all kind of look at that person to get their reaction. And we want either the green light or the red light from them. And that's what we call an informal leader. We look to these people. They can do a lot of influencing. Sometimes you go to these people for help underground when you're trying to roll something out and you know you need help from a different part of the organization. And Michelle, I believe you have an example of this when you rolled out Agile at one of your customers.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. So we were rolling out the Agile process recently at one of our larger customers, and their organization was not used to process. They were used to just getting things done, being very reactionary. And so the senior leadership team was very much behind implementing process. And there were a few key folks on the technical team. I'm sure you guys have all worked with like developers or technical folks. They are not lovers of process. So these folks, they were kind of fighting the process. And there were a few key people, as Jane mentioned, who are informal leaders inside the team who were not following the process. They weren't updating the tickets in the ticketing system. They weren't attending the Scrum meetings. And I finally had to pull these folks aside, and I said to them, I said, hey, this is what's best inside the organization right now in order to get things done. This is what your senior leadership team is asking us to do. I need you to follow this process because everybody inside this organization, whether you like it or not, is looking at you. And if you follow this process, I know others will follow this process. And sure enough, this person started to follow the process begrudgingly, and we started to see some really amazing results. And so as an aside, the process is now up and running. It's smooth, and they are seeing some very significant and positive results as to what they're able to deliver to their clients on a monthly basis as a result of this. And it's in big part due to this one particular resource stepping up and leading everyone else, even though they did not have an official management title. So it's very important to know who your informal leaders are and sometimes pull them aside and have those conversations with them. Jane, back to you.
Okay. So why are we even going through this, and what's the importance of understanding the difference between leadership and management? And the reality is, most of us want to be leaders and not just managers. I say most, there's a group of people that definitely like the management part better than the leadership things. But if you want to be a leader, you really have to walk the talk. And so you need to pay attention to all these seemingly little things that add up and make a difference for your team. And there are a lot of misconceptions on what an effective leader is. I think we have all heard many times that leaders are born, not made. And I would argue that leaders absolutely can be made. It just requires perseverance, introspection, a lot of hard work. It means looking at yourself in the mirror and seeing what the ugly is, and if it touches other people and influences them, you need to fix that. When I first became CIO at Anthem, I was criticized for being very standoffish and snobbish. And when I asked more questions about that, because that isn't my personality, I don't think, and for those of you who know me, I don't think you would describe me that way if you know me. What I found out was, as I walked down the hall, I didn't make eye contact with people. I looked away. And it came more from shyness and uncomfortableness than me being standoffish. But my team was seeing that as I didn't care about them. And so very quickly, it was up to me to become totally out of my comfort zone and look people in the eye and smile and start a conversation. And inside, my stomach is turning and I feel like I'm going to throw up. But you know what? It worked. Then people would come up and they would greet me, and the whole thing just went in a very positive momentum. Some people are naturally charismatic. I am not one of them. And when you see those naturally charismatic people, we want to follow them. And think, for instance, Barack Obama, John F. Kennedy. Those are just naturally charismatic people that you're attracted to. Whether you agree with some of their politics or not, you can almost put aside because there's something about them that's appealing. The second misconception is leadership is a title. It isn't just a title. Assigned leadership can be a title or come with a title, but you still need to deliver. Our employees have a great way of kind of see that the emperor is wearing no clothes. So if you're not able to provide that bigger direction, bigger platform, growth opportunities for them, they know it. We can kid ourselves and say they don't, but so it is more than a title. And leaders just delegate. Leaders roll up their sleeves. Sometimes, though, it's not so apparent that that's what they're doing. Delegation is a very, very good strategies for leaders to use to bring the rest of their team along and to grow them into new people. So what I learned as I was going through umpteenth hundred leadership classes in a variety of different companies is anything that somebody else on my team could do, I shouldn't be doing it. I should be letting them do it, and I should be letting them stretch to the next level of that. And I should be doing the same thing of me. I should be looking at my boss and what he or she shouldn't be doing, and I should be taking that away from them. So that it looks like delegation, but it could also be pulling away that work to try a new level of activity. I used to, as I would groom people to go from the director level to the VP level, I'd use delegation as a strategy by giving them so much, knowing that they could not do it all. And this sounds mean, but it actually works really well. Give them so much that I knew they couldn't do it all. And I'd watch how they'd delegate the easier tasks to their team, and they would take on the more challenging for themselves. And when would they come and ask for help? And that's very telling because you can see what people are made of. Most people want to please their boss, so for the longest time, they'll try to do it all. And then you can watch them go to their natural tendencies and see when they need to hand it off to someone and when they need your help. And that's really a good way to surround yourself with talent. You should also surround yourself with people that make up for your weak spots so you do have people to delegate to. Again, when I became CIO, I came from a background of healthcare, but not technology. And so my first hire, literally within a week, I had a job posted for a chief technology officer because I knew I needed somebody who knew technology cold and I needed to trust them. One of the best hires I ever made. So when it looks like they're delegating, there's usually an underlying story there, and a good story. Leaders are always confident. Leaders are not always confident. However, they seem to know when to show their vulnerabilities and when to put them aside. Sometimes it makes sense to show your team, you know what, I really don't know what I'm doing right now. Well, actually, that's probably not the best way to do it, but I'm a little less certain with what I'm doing right now, and I need your support surrounding me. And then there are times when you need to be leading the charge, gung-ho, fully confident, letting people know that you're in charge. Even if you're quaking a little bit inside, it's kind of like buck up and be the leader that they need. Michelle, I know that you have some examples from Anthem also that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so a long time ago in a faraway place when I was much younger and did not, before I started CoreTech, I worked for Anthem and I worked in a project management role there. And during the course of my tenure there, I eventually worked my way up to a management leadership position. And what I learned very quickly when I made that transition is that even though when you're doing project management, you are managing people inside a project to get things done is very different than managing people inside of an organization towards their own personal growth and grooming them and many of the things Jane has mentioned. And unfortunately for me at the time, what I learned was that people management was not my strength. I did not have the warm, I call them warm and fuzzy skills that you often need to lead people and help them on their career path. And so I had to very quickly learn, because my team was starting to recognize that, I had to very quickly learn and teach myself, one, how to be confident, as Jane mentioned, because if you're not confident, then your team is not confident. So how to be confident. I used what I always refer to as the fake it till you make it approach, where you are just pretending more to be confident than you actually are. And if you do things in confidence, people will line up behind that. So, just showing them that confidence. And then also I had to take, time to teach myself personal growth. How do I manage people? What are the differences? I made the assumption that stepping from a project management role where you're managing people into stepping into a management role where you're managing people was going to be the same and an easy transition. And I was very wrong. And so I had to take some time very quickly to learn and understand what those differences are, teach myself how to be a better manager, and surround myself with people who knew how to be managers already, get a mentor in place so that I could be a strong manager for my team. And so that's the approach I took. I shortly after that, I left Anthem and started my own business, but I did gain a lot of knowledge and experience from that period of time that has gone on to help me to manage people and share with people and mentor people as I've moved on with my career.
Thanks, Michele. Leadership comes from education and time in job. It can, because you have more experiences to learn and to grow as an individual. However, not necessarily. Leaders can be all ages, all sizes, come from all walks of life. I have the fortunate experience to work with a lot of entrepreneurs through an investment committee that I'm on. And one day we had a newer company coming in to present to us, and the CEO was a kid. No joke. 23 would be pushing it. I'm thinking more 20, 21. And that's unusual for a CEO of a startup because, first of all, they don't necessarily have the means. They need some way to pay the bills, and they don't have the experience. But come to find out, this gentleman had already done 2 startups before this, had sold both companies. So he had more means than I had. And he had a team that he found, and his team that was with him, he had a CFO and he had an operations person. The CFO was probably in their 40s or so. The operations person was probably closer to his age, but a little bit older. And they had gone with him from company to company because they had a formula and they knew how to make things work. And they liked the way that this gentleman, Max, led the organizations. They enjoyed working with him. They enjoyed his innovative spirit and the things that he let them grow and do. So on one hand, that did come from experience, but a short experience and a short life. But it was a pretty incredible for me. It was kind of a wake-up call and a very refreshing wake-up call to just see such a young, dynamic leader. Since then, that company has sold for many, many millions. And he is on to his next one here in Indiana. So the impacts of poor leadership on an organization are huge. Poor leadership results in everything from confusion and anxiety about where we're going. Lack of direction is one of the ones that frustrates me the most, because it always feels like you're spinning in circles. And no matter where you stop, it's a different view each day, but you're attacking all of them. I worked for a fairly small company a couple years after leaving Anthem. Technically, they were a startup, but they were a little bit better funded than a startup. And it was a healthcare company for elderly people. And we literally ran after every shiny object on any given day, and we got absolutely nothing done. And what I mean by running after every shiny object, we'd go in on a Monday, and the CEO would have had a conversation with somebody over the weekend about how if we sold this product to the children of the elderly, they would buy it and they would spend tons of money. So let's come up with a marketing plan and make the software consumer friendly and get out to them and do it quickly in a week or so. So it was all hands on deck, heads down, we're doing that. The next week he comes back, he'd been on a plane ride and he was talking to a home health care person. And he really thinks that software would be good for the home health care industry now and helping people either stay in their homes or in independent living situations. So let's refocus the software on that market. And so it continued. And you bang your head against the wall because you literally get nothing done. End of the day, that company ended up shutting down and going out of business. And I believe that was a big part of it. And even though I was a senior leader there, it couldn't focus the CEO. He just couldn't focus them. So when you've got things like lack of direction, it also leads to lack of morale. People aren't invested in what's going on when there's no leadership. And so there's lack of coordination, there's lack of teamwork, low company performance, because you're not all marching in the same direction, so you're not getting things done. And often it results in micromanaging because, if I just manage it tighter, it will get done. And that just makes you go into that whole death spiral. Michelle, you were going to talk about an example about strong personalities and what they can do to morale.
Yeah. So again, as I mentioned previously, project management and people management are very different. And so I'm going to share a little bit of experience, from my personal struggles, right? So I have a very high D personality. If ever you've taken a DISC assessment, that means I'm very directive. I have a very strong personality. I have very strong opinions. That is great. I'm well known in the project community for being able to come in, take a project that's falling apart, and getting it back on track and over the finish line. That is a strong attribute that I have on a project perspective. However, the way that translates into management is I often come across as very unapproachable, or my opinions are the only opinions that count, and things have to be done my way or, the highway, so to speak. And that has a huge impact on morale. Now, inside, which people obviously can't see inside, that is not at all how I feel. I do definitely have a very strong personality with very strong opinions, but I like to be challenged. And so when my employees challenge me, oftentimes, while I might not be immediately reacting, I am listening, taking that away, and then making adjustments. And so I've had to learn over the years in order to improve morale, in order to improve just overall leadership skills, how to have a softer approach and how to communicate back, even if I am, very assertive and very opinionated, how to communicate back how much I appreciate my employees challenging me, and how much I am taking into consideration what they're sharing with me and implementing many of those things over a period of time. And that was a huge learning curve for me personally that did have a huge and initially a significantly poor impact on morale, but then over time as I improved, it's had a huge and significantly improved impact on morale. And I've surrounded myself with people, I believe, who genuinely want to work with me and see CoreTech and our clients be very successful as a result. So just to see how the positive and negative of just one personality type can impact morale. We have lots of other examples to share as we go through this series.
So then if you look at poor leadership and the impact it can also have on lack of coordination and teamwork, low company performance, transparency, and ownership, it's when you have a group of people who are not working towards a common vision or not working under the leadership of somebody who genuinely cares about them and can share that vision and that picture with them, they lose that desire to work together, to give each other the benefit of the doubt. It becomes a blame game, and nobody takes ownership over who's responsible for which piece in getting things done. And all of that results in a very negative workplace environment. And I hope that none of you have worked in an environment like that before. Most of us can vet that out pretty quickly in an interview, or at least like day one on the job, and get out shortly thereafter, I would hope. Because it's just not fun to be there and we spend too much time at work. So when you're thinking of your employees and knowing the amount of time they're coming in the office, there's an onus on you as a leader to make sure that the workplace environment is positive for them, because they can go elsewhere and they will go elsewhere eventually. So the whole mismanaging of resources is not using people to their fullest potential is the greatest challenge that leaders have, is find what sparks each individual and how to align that spark with the vision that you have for the organization and the goals that you're trying to get done. And they'll just take off. It's fabulous. See. So there are many types of leaders and leadership styles, and if you Google them, you'll come up with pages and different philosophies, etc. So we've taken a sampling here that covers most of them. They may be called, have different titles and by different authors, but this covers the gamut to a certain extent. Several different types of leaders. There's a technical leader and a thought leader. The technical leaders, Michelle and I both referred to earlier in some of the examples. You've got your architects, your people who are always on the cutting edge, the innovators who see what's coming years before we even know it's coming. And we look to them for what technologies should we be thinking about, gearing up for, etc. I had the privilege of hiring a chief technology officer, a gentleman by the name of Pushpindu Paul, who came to work with me at Anthem. And when he went home at night, his passion was so great for technology that he played on the computer. He was reading journals. He was out in worlds that I didn't even know existed. But he would come in and challenge his team, because he led the innovation team. We called them the sandbox at the time. He'd challenge them, try these new technologies and see how we can apply them to healthcare. Don't go too far. Let's see if they're a dud or if they're good. And then he'd give me the heads up with, don't pay attention to these 3 new things that are coming up in the literature, but this 4th one, start reading about it. Start, getting a feel for how we can use it here, because I've got my team working on it and I think there's something real. That's incredibly helpful to a whole organization, to me as a leader, to his team. And then you look to Olive Anthem, who wants to be a leader in delivering healthcare. A thought leader is an individual who is, again, looking at that great big horizon and seeing what is out there and how are the politics, the economics, and everything changing, and what is that going to mean for us? I had the honor of working for a man, Dr. Donald Berwick, early in my career. Some of you may have heard of him. He's considered a guru in healthcare quality. When I first met him, he was still a pediatrician, and healthcare quality was fun for him, but he just took that off and exploded. He would go talk to people all over the world about how to make healthcare better. He'd talk to banking systems, etc. And now if you Google him, he will pop up, or if you Google healthcare quality, his name will be there. He's considered a thought leader for that type of space. Then there are leadership styles. There's the autocratic style, the boss. One could argue President Trump is kind of in that, would like to be in that position. Putin could be classified in that position. It's rarely effective unless your whole organization is set up for it to be that way. Some kingdoms are set up that way. There can be a king. An autocratic works very well. In the United States, it certainly doesn't, as we see on a regular basis. And Michelle, you have a nice example for us about one of your former bosses.
Yeah, so I worked for a CIO for a while who was definitely an autocratic leader. He was what I would call, I was much younger, he was scary. He frightened people, not just me, but a lot of the people he worked for. You know, he was a big guy, tall, and just very intimidating. And he definitely wanted things his way. And he knew he was like that. So he kind of knew he could tower over you and get you to do what he wanted. And I was managing a project under him at the time, and there were things falling apart that had nothing to do with me. They had to do with other teams. But as the project manager, I'm the one who's got to give this message back to him about the things that have fallen apart, or the things that we didn't have access to that we needed, and how dates were slipping as a result. And one of the things I learned in this experience, because I was terrified to go back to this guy, I gave him the message alongside of my manager at the time. We had to go together, and he did his thing where he kind of towers over you and says, no, you're not going to miss this date. This is how it's going to be. And my manager, who I looked up to and respected, and who, by the way, has gone on to be a director at another local healthcare company, so very smart man, he kind of cowered back from this CIO. And this is probably when I learned that my personality was a high D, because I didn't. I probably should have, but I didn't. And I just very factually said to this man, you can yell at us if you want, you can be angry if you want, but these are the facts, and this is what's going to have an impact on the date. And here are the things I need you to do in order to help this. And it was amazing to me in that moment, from that point forward, the amount of respect that man had for me. Not only did he not treat me that way anymore, but he would often come to me or send other people to me as a result to get my opinion on things. Partly because I think when you have an autocratic personality or an autocratic leadership style, you're looking for those people who aren't going to cower to you. Now, that's not true of all autocratic leaders. That was just a positive experience I had in this case. But ultimately, you have to sometimes learn how, as an employee, to stand your ground against those types of leadership styles, which can be very scary and intimidating, and was a difficult experience for me, for sure. Jane?
Yep. So then there's the transactional type of leadership style, which is there's a certain hierarchy, and you take orders of the overall charge, and then you implement to your team. So think military, NFL coaches. You got somebody at the top, the general, head coach, who's, this is what we're going to do. And then you go off to the quarterback coach, offense coach, defensive coach. They give their things. Or you go to the military and they parse it down. So it's a different kind of leadership. Laissez-faire is more of a hands-off. Employees run the show. Sometimes it's effective depending upon the situation. If it's a small, like a startup company or employee owned, I don't have any real good examples of when it particularly works well or doesn't, but I'll keep looking for them. The type that we're probably all more familiar with is more of the participative and the democratic style of management. It tends to be one of the more effective types because people are involved. You may not have the final say in what's happening, but you're able to give input in the direction and where you're going. And Michelle, I believe you have an example of how it can backfire.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share more of my own personal growth story. I feel like I've been giving a lot of examples of that along the way. So as I mentioned before, with my high D personality, some of the feedback that I've gotten in a management role is that I'm unapproachable, or it's often people feel like it's my way or the highway. And as a result of that feedback, I tried to change my approach and pull in some of those softer skills. Now I've gotten to a point where I'm fairly effective at that, but initially when I tried to make these corrections, I auto-corrected so far in the other direction into the democratic participative approach that it did backfire, because what happens is you can't make everyone happy. So somebody still has to be the deciding factor, and somebody is still going to be upset, because even if you have a team of 5 people, you may make 4 people happy and one person is still going to be unhappy. As a leader, there's just no way for you to make the entire organization happy and content with your decisions. By nature, people have different opinions. And so I auto-corrected, and in auto-correcting and going too far into the democratic style, I created a new problem inside my organization because I was trying to keep everybody happy all of the time. And so then folks lost respect for me because they felt like I was wishy-washy or couldn't make a decision. And so it's really important, even in the democratic style, which is the preferred style in our leadership organizations, that you find that balance between not going too far into trying to make everyone happy and knowing that you still have to ultimately make a decision and be a leader so your team feels that you're confident and not wishy-washy. It was a very valuable lesson that I had to learn the hard way. Jane?
Yep. The last style is the transformational style, which can be effective in the right circumstances. And I worked for this incredibly bright woman who joined Anthem as the CIO and brought me from the East Coast out there. They brought her in to basically upheave the organization, put in new technology, help switch the focus from a health benefits to more of a managed care company. This is almost 20 years ago now. And she was fabulous in surrounding herself with a group of people who had can-do attitudes and inspiring all of us to want to do the things that she had laid out in her vision. And over the course of 2 years, not even 2 years, she started on a path that we were achieving these things. And yet as the road got a little bumpy, her desire to be in that position kind of waned. So the interesting part about a transformational leader is they come in to basically turn an organization on its head and get things started. It's a hard place to live, though. So it's effective in the right circumstances, but it's not a long-term strategy. So for her, after she had done so much, she needed to leave because it was time to start soothing wounds and putting in longer term processes and things that she could do, she didn't like to do, she wasn't particularly strong at doing them. So she needed to move on to another company where she could be another transformational leader. So that's a interesting one. And maybe you have worked in a company before where they've hired somebody who comes in and shakes everything up and you're like, what the heck? And then they leave shortly thereafter. But they've really done their job. They've made you look at things a different way, or they've challenged the status quo and deleted some of the things that used to always be done. So that's a interesting one for me, because sometimes I can be a transformational leader, but oftentimes I like to be there for it, but I also like to stay long enough for things to calm down. I need that, okay, we're good, before I move on to the next thing. But what kind of leader are you? We have the core value index, which we invite you all to take. The link's on our webinar page at CoreTech Revolution. And this will help you with what are some of your core values, your core tendencies. Are you a builder? And builder, you're driven by power. You know what needs to be done. And you know what's going to need to be done after that. You just know. Are the merchant? You get things done through people. You're strong on relationships and you know how to maneuver well through people. You're an innovator. You're always inquiring around things, observing, reading, researching, seeking to understand. Or are you more the banker, where you need facts and knowledge, analyze facts and knowledge. And all of us have parts of all of these, for the record. You can see, by taking the CVI, you can see where you're strongest and where you're least strong. And so how do you balance it out given the different situations you're in? So we would really encourage you to take the CVI before the next session, just because you'll have a framework of yourself as you're going through these sessions. And again, the link is on our webinar page at CoreTech Revolution, and we would be very happy if you would take it. We'll talk a little bit about it at our next webinar. Michelle, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to thank you guys for attending today's webinar. Hopefully you found the information valuable. As I mentioned previously, today was just kind of a general overview of the leadership styles and people management. As we get further into the series, we're going to start to dig in a little deeper. Our next series is specific to how to lead and manage people. And as Jane mentioned, the CVI and taking that, understanding where your own strengths and weaknesses lie, will be very valuable going into that webinar discussion. A note is that the basic CVI to get your general results is free. So we're not asking you to take anything that's going to cost you any money, but it will pay dividends for you if you take it prior to attending the next webinar. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat window now, and we're happy to respond to those. If you have not already signed up for the webinar, the next webinar, we encourage you to do that, as that's where we're going to start to dig into a little bit more detail around, again, how to specifically manage people. And we will be also sending out just a short 4-question survey about today's webinar. We would really love and appreciate your feedback so that we can improve our presentations for the future to continue to add value to everyone here. So with that said, thank you very much for attending. We'll stick around for a few more moments for those that may have questions.